Hello, 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 my friends. This is Jem Hawkes at Jessie James Beads. How are you today, my gorgeous ones? I hope that you are doing really, really well. It would be super helpful for me if you could give me a thumbs up or a little heart to let me know that you can see and hear me. I'm sat over here in StreamYard, broadcasting, I believe, to YouTube and to Facebook at the same time, which is really clever. It's a lot cleverer than I am. Just to let you know that we're not seeing my face today because I've had a little bit of a boo-boo and nobody needs to see my eye in the shape it's in. So I will be hand camera for you today. But that means that you can gaze upon the most beautiful beads that we have available. Jessie James Beads at Walmart, and I'm looking at glass strands in trios. Now you can use the other glass strands if you prefer, or you can do a mix and match from one of the bulk packs. Now I've worked with pink, with pastel and with stormy, and I love each of them. And whilst pink isn't my usual go-to for a colour collection, I've got to say that this is a really fabulous box. Now I've used lots of these in my designs. I've also put some out on my little display plinth just here. And the box is still nearly full. So if you do have a Walmart nearby, have a quick gander and see which Jessie James Beads treasures you can find featuring our beautiful beads. So the glass strands that I have used on the board, let me just get this beautiful big bulk box out of the way. I'm going to shimmer it one more time, because frankly, I love that noise. Who doesn't love the noise of beads, right? Kim is in. Good morning, my darling. Can you see and hear me okay? Everything good with you, my love? How's the weather where you are? It's been a bit meh, but not terrible in Blighty today. A little bit cool, but it hasn't been hammering down, so that's a win. Let's just show you some of the pieces that I've made so far. And all I'm doing is the simplest jewellery making today. This is accessible to everyone. If you've never worked with wire before, I thoroughly encourage you to give it a try. The only wire that I'm adding in today is 18 gauge round. You can work with soft, with medium temper, German style, craft wire, really doesn't matter. Coming in from Carson, California, says Kim. Debbie is in as well. How are you today, Debbie? Where are you watching from today? Lovely to have your company, guys. Thank you for watching us both on YouTube and on Facebook. It's brilliant to have your company. Good morning from Northern California. Hi, Jem. Cecilia, welcome. I hope that you are well, my treasure. So the first strand that I wanted to show you that I've already worked with is this fabulous glass strand from Walmart featuring Jessie James Beads. I always feel like saying Jessie James Beads, but it seems like a bit of a mouthful. So this is a trio strand, which means that you have 3 main collections on one strand. And I'll show you a crystal one in just a second. Anne is in from California. Hello, my lovely. Paula is in from Indianapolis. Debbie's watching from Oregon, and Stephanie has joined us. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thanks for hanging out today. Lovely to have your company. So as I say, you've got 3 main types of those beads. We've got some gorgeous bicones, we've got some crackle rounds, and we've got some faceted cubes, which I absolutely adore. And each of these mini collections are separated by a little super sweet collection of them own design, just to add a little bit extra. So this is what one of our glass trio strands looks like before it's cut, and this one is one we're going to work with today. So we've got huge bicones, we've got disco ball faceted rounds, we've also got these absolutely fabulous, I don't know what you'd call them, beads. Linda is in. Love to watch you from Franklin in Tennessee. Welcome. Zandra is watching from Kentucky. Welcome, darling. Thank you so much. Denise is in from Texas, and Susan is in from, I want to say Georgia, but I'm not too clever on the abbreviation, so apologies if I get that wrong. As you can see, we've got 3 distinct collections of beads separated by these gorgeous little spacer stations. So we'll be working with this crystal strand today. Those are gorgeous. Penny is in from Nevada. Welcome. Kim says those are gorgeous. They absolutely are. So this was the trio strand in pink, and I have harvested, I'm bringing it back, the bulk pack in pink. I have added in a handful of beads from this selection, and I've just popped some onto my little dish today that we can use in today's design to go with the crystal bead collection that I'm working with today. That's another trio strand. Unfortunately, by the time this one came to me, its little tag had long since wandered off, so I don't know what that one is called. Sorry about that. Judy says, hi there, Jem from Alvin in Texas. Great weather here today. Happy to see another video from you. Love your work. That's so kind of you. Thank you ever so much. The Walmart in Stephanie's area doesn't have JJB beads. I'm sorry to hear that, my darling. Why don't you give our customer services a contact? The email can be found very easily on the Jessie James Beads main website. Drop them a line and see if they can help you. You never know. They might be able to point you in the right direction. They're very, very helpful folk in the web store customer services. So we'll be working with this one in a little while. Now, I found this fabulous peachy toned heart in that big bulk pack featuring the pink style beads. And that is what I added to my trio in pink. Let's just pop this one back up at the top for now. Hopefully you'll still be able to see enough of it. Hi from St. Pete in Florida. Is that St. Petersburg? We went there in 1989. Oh, it was lovely. Very, very nice. This is Trio Strand in red. Now, you might like to match pink and red together. I don't know, but I thought it looked spectacular with some of the gold pieces that I found in that pink bulk pack. So with the red strand, you again have got these gorgeous disco ball faceted beads. And as I mentioned at the very top of today's show, I want to show you that working with wire can be really easy. You don't need any specialist skills. You need a handful of tools. The crystal strand, says Paula, is called Trio Crystal. Hey, I should have been able to work that out really, shouldn't I? If I'd have just applied a tiny bit of thought. Trio Crystal. I'm just going to keep on calling it the crystal strand and you'll know what I'm talking about. You can find them at Walmart, Hobby Lobby and Michael's. That is awesome. Thank you for your help, Kim. This is Trio in Tan. Let's pop this out of the way. What a gorgeously sultry collection of bead tones this is. It's almost like the world's most beautiful, sexy peach. Almost cognac, but it's got this overlay to it. You also feature on this strand these gorgeous faceted flat coins. They are stunning. They work really, really well on the wrist. So the tools that I'm going to be using today, a sensible pair of flush cutters to make sure that you get a nice smooth bit on the end. I've also got either round nose pliers, bail making pliers or memory wire finishing pliers, whichever works for you, something with a round bit on it. I've got to hand also some chain nose pliers, although I will probably use my bent chain nose pliers because they're much easier to show you what's happening on screen. And again, apologies that my face isn't making an appearance today. It's in a bit of a state at the moment. Oh dear. So what we have now is our chosen wire. I mentioned a little bit earlier on, with this design, you don't have to be fussy. You can use a softer wire, you can use craft wire, you can use German style wire, you can use a medium temper wire, you can use raw copper wire, you can use coated wire, you can use whatever colour you fancy. And I have a length of around about 15 inches cut in 18 gauge round wire. So it's around about 15 inches, which is suitable for pretty much all wrist sizes. So what we are going to do to begin with is to make sure that that is nice and smooth and warm all the way along. And you can achieve this. You don't need a blowtorch. You don't need specialist tools. If you have very sensitive skin, you might prefer to put little white cotton gloves on, or you might prefer to use some finger protectors. I just like to feel that wire becoming softer and smoother and much more pliable. I think I've given that a little bit of attention about 5 times now, and that's plenty to make it do what we want it to do. So I'm going to ensure that I've got one end close to me, and I'm just going to trim away that last little bit to make sure that there's a nice flush cut. We'll probably trim that later, but just in case I forget, well, let's turn a little round form on the end. Now, this isn't permanent. All we're doing here is making sure that when we start adding the beads on at one end, they don't all fly off the other end, because I've done that before and it's annoying. So let's just slide that out of the way for now. And then we are going to cut our beautiful crystal trio, or trio in crystal, whichever way round it was. I think Kim told me and I've already forgotten, sorry. So let's trim the end away. Now these are absolutely packed on, absolutely packed on. When you're working with glass beads, you need to make sure that you respect the beads. So I'm just going to pull that little clip out of the way, trim the end away, and pop that into the scrap pot so it doesn't end up on the floor under my toesies, because that would be sad. And all I'm going to do now is to slide this entire strand onto that wire. Now, if you're very clever, you can do it directly from the threading material. Sometimes it doesn't go to plan. If that happens, it doesn't really matter. You can put them on in whatever order you fancy, but I will be the first to admit to you that I am terrible at threading beads on things. Really, really not very good at all. So for me, it's much easier just to slide them directly on from the strand. It saves you watching me struggling for hours and hours on end trying to get beads on. It's groovy with these giant, great big disco balls. They're really easy to use. You can just slide those directly from that temporary strand onto the wire. We have a lovely comment from our fabulous team. Jessie James Beads are joining us today, and it says these are also available on walmart.com and jessiejamesbeads.com. There you go. So if your local Walmart doesn't have a large enough selection, it doesn't have the choice that you want, or you can't find exactly what you're looking for to complete these fabulous, ever so easy stacking bangles, we've got you. Do not fear. Now, this is the bit. Now, the beads are getting smaller. This is generally when I drop them all on the floor. They're not tiny, but yes. So all I'm doing is transferring every single bead from my crystal glass strand, the trio strand, onto that long piece of wire. And as I mentioned a few moments ago, I just popped a little tiny circle on the end of that wire just to stop my beads from falling off. So let's get that actually on the line. I think that's the last one. It is indeed. So all I've done is I've just popped them all onto that 18 gauge wire. And again, that was 18 gauge round, any wire that you have available, around about 15 inches. You can see that little round form is acting as a bead stopper. So I'm going to add another bead stopper at the other end just by rotating around like so, to make sure that my beads don't escape whilst I am doing things. Now, it's very, very handy to have a wrist available to make sure that your beautiful bangle is going to fit perfectly. What you can use, if you like, is a mandrel form. I think I have one over here. I've just got a round one here. These also come in a beautiful oval, which is perfect for these stacking bangles rather. However, what I would say, because we warmed that wire so nicely, I want to show you something. And if you are afraid of working with wire, look at this. All we're doing is just using the warmth in that wire to circle all the way around. Now, what we don't want to do is put any undue pressure on glass beads. They don't really like it. To be fair, no beads really like it. Now, you can see where we are right now. I have simply transcribed from the bead strand as it came from Walmart and popped that directly onto the bangle. If you want to change the order so that these are completely symmetrical, you could go for smaller beads nearest to those connection points and larger beads in the middle so that they sit on the back of the hand. You could completely turn it on its head. You could completely randomize and use... She's shaking the beads again. You could use one of the bulk packs as well. This is pink. It's also come over to me in pastel, which is just divine. And I also have the Stormy collection, which is gorgeous, right up my street. But today we're working with pink, because you can see that in that pink bulk pack, we've got metallic findings in golds as well. And I think they'll work really, really well with this crystal trio strand. I finally caught you live, Jem. You've inspired and taught me so much. Heather, aka Mama Aston. Mama Aston, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us on the live today. I hope that you are keeping well. So what we're looking to do at this stage, we don't need to worry overly if it's not completely perfect, but what we're looking to do is to get a really good size. We're just going to pinch in the middle, pinch those two wire ends. They've got no beads on them just yet, and make sure that that will go over your hand or the hand of your intended recipient. So that's quite snug, but because they're beads, they will rotate around. When you're working with wire wrapped more elaborate bangles, sometimes you can stop that rotation from happening, and then you need a teeny tiny bit of extra space because your hand just doesn't roll through. It's quite mechanical and I love it. So what we're going to do now is to make loops on both ends. Again, when you're working with any beads, we need to be respectful of those beads. Ruth has joined us from Ohio. Welcome, darling. We never want to put too much pressure on them. We're always going to leave them a bit of a gap just to wiggle around on the wire. Wire is strong, obviously being metal, and beads can be damaged if you are mean to them. So let's not be mean to them. What I'm going to do then is just open this out slightly so you can see one side at a time rather. I'm going to hold across that wire for a second, making sure that I haven't accidentally pushed the beads around. There we go. I'm going to make sure that there's a nice gap at one end, and I'm pushing that wire out sideways like so. And all I'm going to do now is a closed up wrapped loop. So again, you can use your round pliers, your memory wire finishing pliers as I am, or you can use your bail making pliers. All we're going to do is to create a nice round form at one end, and you can make it quite small if you want to. So if I just pop that end down, it should enable me to pop that plier in, rotate that wire all the way around to create a round form on the end of that strand of wire. So because I know I've got plenty of wire spare just here, I'm not overly worried about making sure that this is in an exact position to begin with. So I've got my round form on the end. What I'm going to do is to apply some strength to it very quickly and make sure that the round form sits neatly on the end of that strand of wire, so it's centralized and straight. I'm also just going to close my pliers and open them a couple of times very, very gently, just on the end there, to get a little bit more strength in this last ½ inch of wire, so that when I grip that round form and start rotating the tail around, it's not going to pull it out of shape. What can happen when you're wrapping 18 gauge onto 18 gauge, they're both equally strong. One can pull the other out of shape. So I'm going to go for, I think, 4 wraps around that core wire. And I'm looking to have that nice and neat and tidy, as if I'm making a little spring. Let's give that a squish up, like so, before I just flip it to see the inside here and trim away with the correct side of my flush cutters. Pop that in the scrap pot. Now what we need to do is to make sure, let me just get this closer to the camera. It might go a bit blurry, but you can see there's a sticky outy bit, yes? There we go. What we need to do is to make sure that that's nice and smooth. The best and easiest way to do that. You can see that the wire is coming in this direction before I cut it. So I'm going to move my pliers very, very softly around that cut end, hitting the camera, obviously. And what that will do, the edge of the pliers, the flat edge of the pliers, will smooth down that sticky uppy bit. So make sure that that's nice and smooth. What we're not wanting to do is to tighten up that round form on the end. So just make sure that that stays nice and round. And if you've accidentally unrounded it slightly, you can just pull that back into shape. Now you can see that all of my beads have wiggled around a little bit. That's fine. What we need to ensure that we do is to keep the basic form that we're looking for, which is not a completely closed bangle. If I show you one of the pieces I made earlier, there's a big gap. And that is to enable us to add the correct distance between those 2 wrapped loops we're about to make for the relevant size of wrists that you're making for. So I tend to make them just a little bit larger than I need them. I've got little wrists, but medium hands. So you need to ensure, because these are closed bangles, that you can get those on. If that's a struggle, what we can do, instead of going closed wrapped loop into closed wrapped loop, is you can work in a closure point. You can make a smaller bangle, but add in a small clasp. Today, I wanted to make the easiest possible available to everybody design, which is why I've gone for this wrapped loop design. So we're going to push those beads all the way around, making sure that they're not so tight against the first wrapped loop that there's any risk. And we're going to leave the same sort of space as we left on one end, so you can eyeball it. There are 4 wraps. Now, 18 gauge wire measures 1 millimetre across, so we need to leave between a 4 and 5 millimetre gap before we turn another bend out to the side. And again, you don't need to be overly tight on this. If there's a little bit of wiggle in those beads, that's only for the best. It's only a good thing. So let's grab hold of those bails. I beg your pardon, they are memory wire finishing pliers. Just rotate that wire all the way around again. And we're creating both of these loops in the same orientation. I think that's a little bit bigger. I might have used the small one on the first side. Let's make that a little bit smaller, shall we? There we go. So we're making them in the same orientation, which is basically flat to the back of the hand if you half put it on your hand. Let's give that a squish. Strengthen that round loop on the end. And again, you've got this lovely excess of wire to work with. Give that a lovely squish to make it nice and strong. And you can also very, very softly open and close a couple of times just to give you that extra added strength on the small tail we're working on next. So let's bring that tail all the way around. Now I'm gripping quite firmly with my dominant hand to keep the round form. That's 1, 2. Now, this is a really good thing to show you. I'm just going to do that really loosely. Can you see how we've got a gap in that wrap? You don't really want a gappy wrap. So if that happens, you can put one end of your pliers inside that loop, the other underneath the spring form you're making, and just pinch it up together, give it a gentle squeeze, and on you go. It always pays to show when things don't go quite to plan, because it means that you can fix it yourself. Now, can you see we've got a gap here? Don't even worry about it. That's only a good thing. We need a little bit of space for those beads to joggle around as they are on the wrist. So let's close that up, making sure everything's nice and tight. Tighten up that spring if you need to. And again, we're going to cut on the inside of the bangle. Trim that away, pop into the scrap pot. Now this amount of wire, I cut similar amount off the other end. These are really good for practicing making spirals or making little spiral charms. And I'm just going to keep those to one side because I'll show you, if you remind me at the end of today's show, I'll show you how to make a little spiral charm that you can add any bead from your bead stash or from the fabulous bead mix. Before we go any further, let's make sure that we smooth down the end of the wire on the wrap loop we've just completed. Make sure that they're both nice and tidy and everything is sitting as you expect it to. Let's get that close to you. Can you see that end section just here? What we're looking to do is to turn those pliers around on it to smooth it down just a little bit. Slightly easier for me if I turn that in the opposite direction. Scooch those beads out of the way and just rotate those pliers around. It's going slightly blurry because it's higher than the focal distance of my camera, but I want you to see the difference between before you rotate those pliers and after, when it's a little bit smoother. Can you see that's a little bit smoother? So that's not going to hurt your wrist or anything. So at this stage, what you can do is you can just open that out a little bit, make sure that you're happy with the overall shape. And then you can also take an estimation of what kind of size you need in the middle. Now, if your end bits are sticking up wildly, what we need to do is just to slightly control them and bring them down. When I make stacking bangles like this, I tend to make them in a slightly more oval fashion, just because they can all slide on really nicely to the back of the hand, like so. I think they look beautiful with that slightly oval fashion. Hi everyone, says Karen. Hello, my lovely. Welcome. Thank you for watching with us live today here at Jessie James Beads. So you can see that those feature bits sit on the back of my wrist really nicely. Let's pop that back down. And we will continue with that demonstration. Whoop. I wanted to put them all on because frankly, they're fun to wear. So that was tan, red and pink that we're working with. And those are the glass strands. We're also working with some beads from the bulk pack, which comes in a lot of different colorways, but I'm working with the pink one today. So what we will need to do next is to assess what kind of size and shape we want. You can obviously make these completely round if that is your preference. I like them to be a little bit on the oval side. So let's just slide that on for a second. And what we're going to do, if you're making for yourself, which I thoroughly encourage you to do, take it to the widest point of your hand, make your hand as small as you can, and then estimate how many beads you'll need to fill just smaller than the gap. And the reason I say just smaller than the gap is because we're going to tie it together with the same technique of a wrapped loop on either end. So I have a length of that same wire. This is 18 gauge round wire. You can use pretty much any wire you've got. 18 gauge is magnificent because it goes through all of these beads without any problems whatsoever. It's strong enough to work, but it's light enough to be easy to wear. It's also soft enough so that people who are newer to wire work can enjoy working with it. Now, the piece of 18 gauge I have now is a copper colour medium temper, and it's around about 5 to 6 inches in length. I've always got a stash like this for now. Debbie says that's a great tip. Thanks. You're very, very welcome. Thank you very much for hanging out with us on the live today. So one of the easiest ways to do this is to estimate about 1.5 inches from one end. Let's pop a right angle bend on. Good afternoon, Yolanda. Welcome. And we're going to create a round form again, all the way round. Close that over the end of whichever round pliers you're using. Give that a squish and a squeeze. And what I'm going to do is to start almost making a hinge section. So if I slide that up inside one of those rounded forms that we created right at the beginning, just slide that into position. I made that a little bit too tight. What you can do is strengthen that round form by squishing across it and then just open it up slightly. Make your life easier rather than harder, which is what I just did. Slide that into the first of those wrapped loops, close it back up. And what we're going to do probably is match the 4 wraps that I did on either end of that crystal trio strand. Let's grip across like so. When I'm gripping across the round form, I'm not putting any pressure where the wires cross over, nor am I stopping it overly from moving on the other wrapped loop. I'm trying to keep it as neat and tidy as possible. So if I do 1.5 wraps, then we can just assess whether I need to tighten that up. And I think probably just a little bit. So let's give that a squish. There we go. Nice and neat and tidy. And then we can complete another 2.5 rotations to give us that matched 4 rotations of wire. Now that's opened up just a little bit. And again, if you pop one end of your pliers, or one side of your pliers rather, inside the loop, the other side at the bottom of that spring, you'll be able to tighten that up really neatly. Now, before you go any further, have a look at that. You can only see 3 wraps from the top. It's very easy to miscount when you're looking from one side or another. So let's bring that all the way around. You can use a second pair of pliers if it's easier for you. There are now 4 visible wraps. You might not mind how many wraps there are, or you may prefer to just stick with 3 if that's easier. So what I'm going to do is to grip hold of that loop, very, very softly bring that tail so that I can cut it on the underside. This is how it will be seen. So that sticky outy bit is currently on the underside. Let's trim it away. And the time you take now is time you won't have to worry about it later. So let's smooth that down really, really nicely, making sure that it won't hurt you and it will stay nice and strong for many years of wear to come. So that's nice and neat and tidy. Dorothy has joined us. Good morning to you, Dorothy. Where are you watching from today? These are great for gifting as well, says Jessie James Beads. Quick and easy to make. They absolutely are. The only reason we're still here is because I talk so much. Let's make sure that that's good and squished. And then we can add our central piece. Now, you can estimate the distance that it takes to make one round form and those 4 wraps, and just gently hold that in position. Make sure that your hand slides in. That's a bit big. So I'm going to tighten that up a little bit. That's much more like it. So I now know that I'll need to make my bend just before it crosses over and links into that second wrapped loop. So if I just pinch that for a second, allow it to spring apart, this is how many beads I need for that middle bit. So let's have a look. If I just flick that over to the other hand for a second, let's see what we've got in here that would work. There's one of these, looks almost like fruit, perhaps. There's one of those, or I could go for some of those beautiful golden discs, one of these beautiful raspberry looking things in the middle, or I could use some of these mini hearts. Let's have a look, see what it looks like with a mini heart on. These have got a gorgeous colour to them. Very, very sweet. And if I pop in the very middle one of those golden, I like to think of them as ridged pumpkin beads, but they are round, so they're not terribly pumpkiny. And then let's see if I can find another one of those glossy hearts. I quite like the clefts of the heart to sit around the outside of that golden spacer. So if I just pinch that into position again, very, very loosely, I know that that will fit really nicely. So again, we're going to estimate how much space we need to allow those 4 wraps and a loop on the end. So let's leave about 4.5 mil, 5 millimeters, and that needs to be with the wire coming down like so. So if I hold that opposite to how we've been holding it for a second, I've brought that down. Now, the reason I'm showing you this is because I want to make this as easy as possible. So let us make half a loop with the small side of my memory wire finishing pliers. I'm just going to add a little bit of strength into that central bar for a second. What we're going to do now is to open the bangle up, slide the end up inside that second wrapped loop, and then we can add in whichever round pliers you're using again to draw that all the way around. So you are making a rounded form that's very similar to the one you did on the first side, and you can very easily just refine that, make it slightly smaller so that it looks as similar as possible. It's much easier than trying to manipulate that entire loop that you make through the already created wrapped loop. So let's grip across that wrapped loop just there, draw the wire all the way around, and my hand will get in the way ever so slightly until you fill that gap really neatly with your 4 wraps. And again, you can give that a bit of a squish just to make it nice and neat and tidy. Compress up those springs if they come out of shape, and make sure that you trim away on the underside of that little bar. So is that 4 visible wraps? It is, but one of them's got really away from me. So let's tidy that up. Give it a squish, give it a squeeze, and you'll make that as neat as possible. Bring that down into position. Mind out for your beads, obviously. And you'll get there. Making sure that you trim away on the underside, as I mentioned earlier. So let's make sure we're using the right side of those pliers to trim that end off. And I'll just take a second to smooth that down neatly. If I draw that all the way around, we'll just get that end nice and smooth. So that is the essence of the design. You can make these by the dozen using your gorgeous Walmart Jessie James Beads bangles, wire and bead collections, beg pardon. So there's just another design that utilizes either bead stash or your glass bead mix in pink. That's a bulk pack. Let's pop that one down there like so. And I promised that I would show you with these scraps of wire how to make little charms. So I'm just going to open this up and I'm going to grab in my round nose pliers, or my memory wire finishing pliers in this instance, and just going to push that over the top so that I can get a little bit of a spiral going on the end. Give that spiral a bit of a squish. Now that's quite a large open center. That's not a problem. Bring that wire all the way around until you've completed 2 rotations. And then that very end section of wire, we're going to pull away at a right angle to begin with. So you've got a little double spiral on the end there. Once you've got that line nice and straight, what we're going to do is pull that away at about 45 degrees. Now, I think I probably will grab my round nose pliers for this and just turn that wire over the top so that the end goes back and meets itself. Give that a straighten up, and then you can add that on as a little charm almost anywhere. These are absolutely fabulous for adding a little bit of weight to extender chains. Just make sure you add a little bit of strength into the circular form on the end. Bearing in mind it's scrap wire, let me flip hands. I'm also going to strengthen up that double spiral as well. Now, if you have a slightly longer piece of wire, you can add in a bead before you make that little loop on the end. And you can use them for earrings and adding on to bangles and all sorts of designs. Well, I hope that you have enjoyed today's live with Jessie James Beads, utilising these fabulous Walmart glass trio strands and the bulk pack. But you could use any beads from your stash if you don't have access to the bulk pack. That was crystal. We had tan. We had red. Oh, sorry, this was tan. That was pink. Thousands of apologies. Let's turn that rose over. That's actually a really beautiful strand bead from the bulk pack collection. So if I haven't seen any of your comments, many apologies. If you have any questions at all, always give me a shout. Check that little rose out. It's absolutely stunning. Cecilia says it's 8:35 here and I'm working on my first cup of coffee. Good for you. Hi, Miss Jem. Love this idea of making bangles. Thank you so much. Bracelets are beautiful, beautiful design. Thank you, Kim, Cecilia, Debbie, Karen. You give great instructions and ideas. Thank you. Thank you. I hope that you have had a lovely day today. And for those of you who are early in the morning, I hope you continue to do so. My name is Jem Hawkes. Well, that's me just down there somewhere. I'm here with you today for Jessie James Beads featuring Walmart bead mixes. Look forward to seeing you again very, very soon. Bye for now.